trying to get you folks to understand this is how the smoke and mirrors works. I just simply want to find out what happened to the American dream as someone who is living the American nightmare. You got to know the facts, and if we came together, we could overcome the corruption that's murdering us all.
I'm just trying to make the world aware of the truth, and I've got it.
Patrick Lovell. I'm an investigative journalist and a television producer. I'm a modern day muckraker. I'm about truth. I'm about justice. I'm about liberty and justice for all. And I'm here to tell you that that doesn't exist anymore. And the reason it doesn't exist is because what you all know intuitively, but you don't understand the details. How many of you think that the system is corrupt by a raise of hands? Let me point it out. Looks like there's about 97 million of you out there that say that the system is corrupt. Okay, by the same show of hands, how many of you know exactly what makes the system corrupt? Who did what, when, and how, and why, and who covered it up, and how that affects everything that happens in your daily lives? Please, by a show of hands, what can I see? All right, I see a smattering out there. I'm counting 1, maybe 2, maybe there's 5. Okay, we'll just call it 13 total. Not too many of you, by way of percentage, understand how your system is corrupt. I'm here to tell you some details that you have never heard before. So turn up the volume, watch this a million times, and try to get hip to what's actually going on, because you're getting played. We're all getting played, and we're getting played by a monstrous, diabolical machine of deception that's literally full of shit. Who am I? The dude that's bringing you the truth bombs, and I'm going to deliver it every day until it frickin' registers, because we've got to make a comeback, and we got to make a comeback now. So what's going on? Well, why don't we start at the beginning and start at the apex of this whole thing, because it's all going to come full circle. How many of you know the name Jerome Powell? Apparently not many of you. Jerome Powell is probably the most important person in the world. Why? Because he's the fair Ched. He's the chairman of the Federal Reserve. And that means he's at the apex of how money flows into the system and out of the system. How many of you know that the guy's under investigation right now and actually guilty of insider trading? Do you know what insider trading is? Do you know who Robert Kaplan is? Robert Kaplan is the chair of the Dallas Fed, one of the regional Federal Reserve banks. He's also being indicted, well, not really, investigated slightly, but some journalists, crack journalists are on it, by the name of Pam Martins and Russ Martins from Wall Street on Parade, and they're the only ones that actually get this and are bringing it to the public each and every day. So I highly encourage you to watch what they're putting out there, because it's extremely important. But do you know what the Federal Reserve does? All right, I'm looking around. Yeah, I'm not seeing a whole bunch of people who actually knows what the Federal Reserve does. The Federal Reserve is what creates the lifeblood of the entire world's economy. Why? Because it can actually digitize money into existence as much as it thinks necessary to put currency into the system of which everybody functions. Now, how does that system function? All right, I'm looking around. It looks like less of you actually know how it actually functions. Do you think money grows on trees? All right, well, the hardworking grandfather over there who worked in the fields his whole life says no. The guy who's just trading in Bitcoin over there, who just lost a shit ton of money, and when he was worth like $10,000 yesterday, might be saying, yeah, it does, but it can also dissipate as quickly. Here's the story, guys. We have a currency called fiat currency. Fiat currency allows the Federal Reserve to digitize as much money as it needs to put it into currency to handle the financial system, so that we could go to the ATM and we can get the money that's supposedly in our account out in cash if we need to, or we can, put on our card or send money to our friends to get them out of jail, or hopefully Valentine's gift to the one we love, which would be preferable. But in the interim, it's the entirety of the financial system depends on having enough money in it to function. Now, at the apex of that system that actually runs the system, you might call them the book. How would you think about this in terms of the casino? I know a lot of us have been to the casinos, and we've always seen the eye in the sky at the tables, and we've always seen those guys, the guys behind the dealers and so on and so forth that are checking things out. It's the boss's boss's boss that's even their boss behind everything, looking at everything from the mind's eye, and they've got access to the whole currency, and they're doing the digit counting every day, and they know what the runs are and how things are managed and what they need to pump into the system and what they need to pull back. That's the whole thing in terms of the Federal Reserve. But it is literally a casino, and this is how it works. So in 2008, we had a great financial crisis. I'm sure many of you know that. I'm sure many of you had families, or your parents, your grandparents lost their homes. Maybe your parents got divorced. Maybe your dad committed suicide, and I'm not taking that lightly. I was somebody who almost did it myself as a result of all this stuff. There was literally thousands upon thousands of suicides and destructive marriages and people that wound up in the streets homeless and just all sorts of insane collateral damage that not even Osama bin Laden, as wild as dreams, could have pulled off. That was done by our own financial system, and this is how they did it. They targeted initially the most vulnerable amongst us. African-American widows that were seniors who had equity in their houses that were set up to get their houses stolen by hyena brokers who had a matrix and a book, a playbook on how they could sell those little old ladies who needed money to get their roofs fixed and their sidewalks fixed. And if they didn't get them fixed, they'd be fined by the city and they wouldn't have money to be able to pay for it. And they didn't have money for their medications and all of the other things that they needed. So these guys would show up and go, hey, your house is worth 3 times more than you ever thought it was because of the nature of how things are going on. I can get you a loan that you can refinance your house. You can live off of this money because you don't have income because you had fixed income and it's stagnant, and yet prices have gone up all around you. So use your house in your late age to refinance so that you can have money for now to do all of those things that you need to do. Well, lo and behold, the little old lady would think that was manna from heaven, and they'd be like, God, thank you. These guys just saved my life. Anyway, they set them up to frickin' lose their lives, because this is how it happened in something that I documented in our television series called The Con, where a 91-year-old African-American woman by the name of Addie Polk, a church-going woman who grew up 400 feet, or I should say LeBron James grew up 400 feet from the church that Addie Polk went to, and in it's actually October of 2008, Miss Polk was being evicted wrongfully from a house she lived in for 4 decades. This elderly woman had cops at the door looking to throw her out of her house. She kept getting eviction notices. She tried to tell everybody that would listen that I own my own home, and I don't understand why I'm getting these eviction notices. Nobody would help her. Nobody could actually, do anything to help her because she didn't have any money to pay him. And in our country, this is how it works. If somebody isn't going to get paid, nobody's going to lift a finger. But here's another little freaking marker on this for those of you who spent every last dollar trying to get somebody to help you. Even the guys that are getting paid to help you don't help you, because that's how corrupt the system is. But in Miss Addie Polk's scenario, what she ended up doing was getting evicted from her house. So instead of going and living in the streets homeless, she pulled out her husband Robert Polk's gun, turned it on her, and shot herself in the chest 5 times. Because she was set up. She was set up like millions of other African Americans who finally got their piece of the American dream after slavery and Jim Crow, and then they had to migrate from the South because of the horrors of lynching and all that other insanity by way of what slavery was actually doing and dehumanizing these people. But they ended up getting jobs in the Midwest factories, building rubber factories and bombs for the World War II effort, and in so doing, they got their piece of the American dream, even though they were exploited, but not nearly as bad as what they were exploited in the agrarian South. So they ended up getting money, saving money, buying a house, and then Miss Addie Polk, with her beautiful, lovely dress and her hat on Sundays, would go to church, and she was a dignified woman for decades. And then she got set up in this situation, and this is how the situation got churned and burned through this massive criminal racketeering. Did it start with brokers at the bottom level? No, it started with CEOs at the very apex of our financial system through what's known as control fraud. So have you ever considered why somebody would lend somebody money that they knew they couldn't pay it back? Well, therein lies the whole story of the con. It was a setup. It was a setup in lending where they used liar's loans and documentation fabrication to get people approved for loans that were based on appraisal fraud that increased the value of their home, that it wasn't worth that much, so that lenders lent against that much because they wanted to get all of these loans into a pipeline that they called securities that then they sent up to credit rating agencies, the biggest of which was owned by the largest investor in this country, Warren Buffett, because they would approve, and say this stuff was AAA when in fact it was just crap that was going to blow up. And then they sold it around the world, and get this, my American, MAGA loving gun rack. Let's take over the state capitol, friends who think you're not a part of this. You were targeted just like Addie Polk. That's right, pensions that have iron workers and steel workers and the guys that actually built this freaking country with their bare hands. I've met them. They got set up because their pensions that they save for their retirement so that they could actually increase their net worth through the hard work in USA and all of those things that actually matter to us. These hyenas of finance had money managers that literally targeted them and called them, I shit you not, this is what they say, stupid money. That's what they consider the pensioners. Stupid money. So what they did was they set up all of these people. Goldman Sachs was at the apex of this stuff. Goldman Sachs is a huge investment bank that's now a bank holding company because of some insanity that took place after the great financial crisis to enable them to get out of what they were to become something they weren't so they could get free money from the Fed that backstopped this crime. They knew exactly what they were plugging into their securities that they were selling to pensioners, to teachers, to your grandmother, to your grandfather who probably died and lost 50% of his pension because these freaking bastards stole it from him. Okay? And so how did they steal it from him? Well, they set it up because they plugged what we call shorts, and they put all of this stuff inside securities based on loans that they knew were going to sell. They packaged it up in these freaking through their money managers that were supposedly paying off interest on the pensioners' retirement. That's hopefully increasing so that they could get money for their retirement. But they were set up to fail. That's what's called the Big Short. But the people who made the Big Short, it was tiny compared to what it actually was. And no, stripped answers didn't cause the fucking global collapse. So what I'm talking about and what you need to know is that the apex behind the scenes of this insane machine is an enemy that you can't see, that I'm trying to actually show a light on because they're the ones in absolute control that are freaking burying you. They're burying me. They're burying everybody as far as you can see because they can. Because you're not informed, because you refuse to get informed, because you want to watch some girl lip syncing on TikTok or some fraternity guy slugging down bottles of vodka and puking because that's entertaining. Meanwhile, life, liberty, and justice for all is a myth. The integrity of law is a myth, and it's all bullshit. But here's the freaking exclamation point on it all, and this is why I'm trying to get your attention, in addition to everything else. So, President Obama comes in on a wave of change we can believe in. He was supposed to be the FDR moment, the president that actually wrangled control of the power to get back government of, by, and for the people. But did he do that? No, he didn't. He was just a front man, my friends, for this machine that I'm talking about. Don't believe me? Call me, talk to me, do your own research, watch the con. The guy covered for Wall Street. He literally went on 60 Minutes and he told, I think it was Scott Kelly, if I remember correctly, that what Wall Street did may have been, disgusting and unethical and all this other stuff, but it was shenanigans. It didn't break the law. This guy's a constitutional law expert. This is a guy that wrote anti-predatory legislation to prevent liars' loans from doing what it did in the African-American communities. And once he's the president, coming out of Chicago, and a lot of us know what Chicago's all about. Not to mention Jamie Dimon was there. And boy, I'll tell you, the Clinton machine was super, super involved with with Wall Street. But man, if Wall Street knew shit was going to hit the fan and that African Americans were a target of it, maybe they needed a guy like that to cover for them. I don't have the actual evidence of that. I'm just speculating. I'm speculating after years and years and years of uncovering everything about who knew what, when, and how, which is on display in The Con, that you can find at www.thecon.tv instead of on Netflix or on HBO, unfortunately, because those guys are owned by the same guys that we reveal are the criminal con artists that run the show. So Obama covers for it. He comes in worth about $3 million into the president. He walks out after book sales and everything else that goes to play the system to make sure everybody doesn't know what the hell's going on. That guy's worth like $140 million with his wife now. Coincidence? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I can't prove. I mean, a lot of people like you bought their books. I've actually read a few books, but I know what the hell that Obama didn't do. Jamie Dimon, who's an absolute recidivist, who's the chairman of the largest bank in the country, one of the largest in the world, if not the largest in the world, literally showed in his prospectus that you can make short-term yield off of this type of activity that we reveal in The Con. So that's the blue side of the house. They And they're covering for the system is what gave us, Mr. Rob Reiner, MAGA. That gave us Trump. Was Trump a rocket scientist? I think he was running by the hair of his ass in 2016. I don't think he actually thought he was going to win. He's trying to make himself, the global spokesperson, everything else, doing hotel deals in Moscow and whatever that worked out with Deutsche Bank and Putin, of course. Insanity. But as we're thinking through the big lie right now, and this is really for all you MAGAs that ended up losing your houses and your pensions, and you're actually trying to think that Trump is a guy that wanted to save you or that is your man. This dude was up to his eyeballs in Griftopia when he was with, when he had his Trump mortgages and they were lying, stealing, and deceiving on documentation fabrication to get loans approved. And they did the same thing with Trump University that he got guilty of and a $25 million settlement that I think is the first time he actually had to plead guilty. This in between all of the other stuff that's been on display recently from him, showing his, claiming his New York Manhattan penthouse is worth $250 million when it's worth $50 million. And it's like supposedly 30,000 square feet when it's worth 30,000 square feet. Why would he do that? Well, it's called control fraud through appraisal fraud because you can borrow money against that infinitum, which he was doing from Deutsche Bank. And by the way, Donald Trump made it out in 2012. He sued Deutsche Bank because he couldn't afford to pay his loans back for being a victim of predatory lending. A guy who was actually up to his eyeballs in predatory lending and documentation fabrication makes a claim that he's Addy Polk. Donald Trump is no Addy Polk. And so all of you Trump supporters that have lost your house in the courts and that are like, he's the guy that's going to save us, while you're also saying that judges are involved with sex trafficking, you're not making the story any easier to tell the world that like Rachel Maddow just recently did with as it relates to Donald Trump. She's blowing up the fact that he had all sorts of documentation fabrication with election certification fraud led by Giuliani, the guy who was actually the good guy and created RICO to take out the mob guys back in the 70s, but he's obviously switched teams since he turned into a vampire. And so here we are. The country's faced with, the Obama camp, which is a Biden camp, which is the 4 decades of the meritocratist Wall Street Dem camp that basically created neoliberalism that led to financialization because they killed the golden goose that they shopped around the world and they created a fictional enterprise economy that pays themselves trillions of dollars in the short term, and you don't get it because you're just too busy trying to survive. And then many of you are like, what? We're going to go salute to Nazism and Steve Bannon and the Fourth Turning and all this crap that's going to be the answer to this stuff when these guys are getting paid to do it too? Who do you think the Mercers are and the Koch brothers? They're monopolist billionaires that are just playing you, and they have been ever since they created Americans for Prosperity and the Tea Party. The truth exists. The emperor's new clothes. It's in the con. And I'm going to bring it full circle to where I started in terms of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve operates with smoke and mirrors all day long based on asset managers that plug all of the stuff that I'm telling you into the system to be able to create hyperinflated assets, to be able to go back to get bought by the government through quantitative easing, which are fictional toxic assets. So the Fed's both supply and demand while everybody else is getting played. It's a mythical, fictional economy that all the major players from around the globe are in on because they launder their money into our real estate, among other things. I'm talking about the Saudi sovereign wealth fund that goes in through the asset managers like BlackRock, who became an anointed king of the freaking world after the 2008 great financial crisis because the Federal Reserve chose them to be the recipient and the administrator of the $29 trillion that they put into the system to backstop this criminality and hide it from the rest of the world that would just never be seen or heard from again until you heard it from me. And it's still going on. It's been going on nonstop. It only got worse. In 2019, the same thing went down with 11.9 trillion that had to backstop derivatives trades, it looks like. And that's, if you add it up, that's 29 trillion, roughly 30 trillion, and another 12 trillion, that's 42 trillion, just for those two events alone. That's $42 trillion. Then we have the CARES Act and everything else. And I'm pretty convinced that, by the way, Steve Mnuchin, who was Treasury Secretary of the Trump administration, allowed Trump to get away with probably hundreds of millions of dollars of that CARES Act. Are you kidding me? The guy who never took a salary, supposedly because, he's a billionaire, Wow, that probably gripped him from the system. What I'm trying to tell you guys is that we live in a system where a lot of the people like that are, holding up their red, white, and blue flags that say they hate socialism are basically walking lockstep in tune with the ultimate corporate socialists. But if you want to get more granular, it's corporate fascism undergirded by a criminal syndicate. It's not democracy. Democracy was lost decades ago, okay? It's a corrupt system. And you guys continue to forego your responsibility as a citizen. The citizens of the United States have got to step up now because the media is fake media. All of this crap going after Joe Rogan for the N-word and the mashup and everything else that is, trying to create, distraction because of, his supposed misinformation on COVID. Meanwhile, they've been misinforming us about this story and many, many others for decades. They're all lying. Every single one is lying. And you can't do anything about it until you've got the facts. And the facts are in the con at www.thecon.tv. Sorry to get fired up. I just give a shit about the United States and liberty and justice for all. And I don't want to go see it in the hands of fascists and Nazis or communists or anybody else. I want the law to work. I want the integrity of the law to work. I want people within our institutions to not be corrupt. And I want the bad guys to get freaking taken down. And there's a way to do that. You know how to do that? First of all, you do the investigation. You get the facts through the institutions like the FBI, the DOJ, and the SEC, and so on and so forth. You put these guys on trial. And that can be done through what's known as a modern-day PCOR hearing. I'm a muckraker trying to get everybody so fucking fired up that they go to our elected leaders who have all been playing this game, even Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. They're not corrupt, but they're playing by the rules of the corrupt. And so therefore, they let it happen. Are they complicit in it? They're just protecting their position, which is bullshit. That has no courage, that has no integrity. We got to flush this whole system down the drain and replace it with the resurrection, not the insurrection, the resurrection based on liberty and justice for all and the integrity of law. That's who Patrick Lovell is. Am I running for president? Hell no, I'm not running for president. I want to continue to bring you truths, but I need to get you on first base. And the home run, the grand slam, the mother bomb truth of them all is the con. www.thecon.tv. Onwards and upwards. And he goes, we're a country of competition. Let's start fucking getting in the game and let's take back control of our country. Onwards and upwards, my friends. Later.
I just made a promise to myself that I was going to find the answers.